What this moment gives us is a chance to reinvest and reinvent, to get that spark of creativity and entrepreneurship that Miami is increasingly known for.
I'm Matt Hagman, and this is Opportunity Miami, a podcast about people and ideas shaping Miami's economic future. Miami has been described as the epicenter of the climate change crisis in the country. But how can Miami transform its climate vulnerability into climate solutions? Today, we're joined by Rosabeth Moss Kanter, the well-known to Miami Harvard Business School professor, who released a case study last year that focused on Miami's climate action, both the possibilities, but also the real challenges. Rosabeth Moss Kanter, welcome.
Thank you, Matt. I'm delighted to be here.
It is so great to have you back in your second city.
More or less, yes.
So, you've been here in Miami, an observer of Miami, a writer about Miami, someone who spotted Miami's promise really long before many others. You decided to do a case study on climate action in Miami. What prompted you to write this now?
Well, so first of all, Miami has been for a long time a city of incredible promise, some of which has been lived up to already. A great global city of the future that went from sleepy southern backwater to a global giant. And of course, at the moment, Miami is the epicenter of the climate crisis with so much promise. And I know people don't want to hear about it, and we have to get positive because one can get a little daunted by the magnitude of the crisis. But I had been following Miami, the economy of Miami, and Miami is included in a program at Harvard Business School that you were part of, Young American Leaders from 14 U.S. cities, diverse cities from around the country. And when I had to do something on leadership for climate action, I thought we have to go to the place that's very vulnerable and that also is beginning to embrace the challenge.
Let's talk about that. We'll talk about the vulnerabilities, but let's also talk about the opportunity. What is, as you think about and write about climate action in Miami, what's the opportunity here for Miami?
So the opportunity is to actually do something about it, that is new businesses with new technologies, new services that help solve the problem, because obviously this is a problem for every coastal city, but also for every city. And cities are so important in the climate crisis, but only recently has their role been acknowledged, because it's where it all comes together. Every aspect of the economy, every aspect of our lives come together in cities, and a high proportion of the population of the world, a high proportion of the emissions come from cities, and the potential for reduction come from cities. So we have to learn about leadership in cities. So the opportunity side is to find solutions. It isn't simply that this attracts people. I mean, people don't want any part of it if your beach is going to wash away.
Right.
I mean, I have northern beaches that I'm very familiar with, and we hold our breath. But the opportunity is that we can actually reinvent our economy. We can solve a lot of other problems in the wake of harnessing human will and technology and change. So what this moment gives us in every city is a chance to reinvest and reinvent, and for a newer city, a chance to build things that hadn't been there before, and also to get that spark of creativity and entrepreneurship that Miami is increasingly known for.
Yeah. So let's unpack the case a little bit, climate action in Miami. What are the things that you want people most to know about this?
All right. First of all, I should explain that a Harvard Business School case is a teaching vehicle. It's not a report, and it doesn't give answers. I give the answers, that is my recommendations, to a note for people who are going to teach the case. But people who read the case are left with puzzles and questions. And that's what the discussion is all about, and that's where the learning comes from. So the main question of this case is, first of all, Miami has a lot of the pieces in place, a lot of the parts absolutely right, but they seem to exist in isolation. Who's going to put them together so that they have real impact? That's one question. And then I wanted people to learn about the various sectors. So the case starts out with a little prehistory that does involve foundations, but then we talk about the public sector, the community activists, and the private sector, the business sectors. What are they doing? So I want people to understand each sector. This is not simply a public policy problem. And you say, oh, we elect people to do those sorts of things. It's not a public works problem alone. It's a community vitality problem. It's an affordability problem. It's also a business opportunity problem. And in Miami, two pieces of the business community seem most important. One is the entrepreneurs. And there are so many more tech entrepreneurs now, partly because of your work. Climate tech is just beginning. But there's also a major force in the business community in Miami, and that's the developers. And I wanted to know where they are. And so people have a chance to explore all these sectors, what they're doing, think about what are the resources that each sector brings, and why aren't they talking to each other? And who should be talking to whom? Because this problem is not a technical problem. There's a lot of science. It's a problem of leadership and organization. Who should be talking to whom? So you can't have impact by doing one good thing here, one good thing there, another good thing over here, and it's all isolated and in silos. Unless it's integrated and connected and people get the vision, and then people in the neighborhood say, oh, that's for me too. They're not left out.
That's a key part. So while this is a teaching document, would love to hear from you on what you think some of the answers are.
Kind of implied a little bit in the questions I was asking, right? And
well,
I
let's
think
do this. Also, you've talked a lot about cross-sector, multi-stakeholder coalitions. Did I get that about right? Okay.
Exactly, you got it right. I used to say, we say it takes a village, the African proverb. I say more than a village, a cross-sector, multi-stakeholder coalition, which doesn't trip off the tongue. So you have to understand the sectors by themselves. What's their motivation? And what are the resources they bring? So the public sector here is already divided into pieces. The county is, of course, all-encompassing, but doesn't even control everything. The schools are county-wide, but they're their own system. They can be doing lots of things, but have to work on coordinating. Then each jurisdiction, the 35 or so jurisdictions, they've all got their own ideas and their own thing they want to do. And there's a city mayor who often seems to represent the whole region. That's the situation. Then what the public sector can do. The public sector controls certain things like public works. They can do bond issues, but they have to get elected. And they have a set of resources that sort of stop at the boundaries of neighborhoods. So we have to get to the activists. There are also, by the way, activists who do a good job of holding public officials accountable. And I talk a little bit about one of them in this very complicated case. And, getting people to agree on things, it's amazing to me that one of the things I found total agreement on, but was the only thing, and you tell me if I'm wrong, was nobody wanted the Army Corps of Engineers to build a seawall.
That unified the entire community.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So sometimes you need a common enemy.
Yes, indeed.
But the county probably would still like the money and a plan that works. But so we have to move though to the recipients of all of this. And so I looked at community activists, and they have their own stake in their own constituencies. What are their tools? Their tools are community organizing and protest. So there are a number of groups doing fantastic work of educating people in every community, even the more affluent communities. This is not just about the lower income, about why this issue affects them, So there's lots of educational groups, there are community organizers, and then there's the protests. The question of the effectiveness of each of those tools and who's included, and they tend to not like the business community.
Right.
And it's also not clear that the public sector is all that enamored.
Which in a way, does this all go to sort of your overriding point around leadership and coordination?
Absolutely. So in the business community, by the way, I should just say a word about that. I already talked about the isolation of the tech and the climate entrepreneurs.
Yep.
The developers, some of whom are really good people. There's one doing some phenomenal things downtown with a new development, with above standards, but most of the developers are good guys. They just do it according to code.
Right.
And also they get in, build it, and they're out. So they don't have a long-term incentive either. So it's also a question of aligning the incentives and finding some common goal. So my first overarching leadership task is finding a common theme, a vision that everybody can support. And I do think that Future Ready, which Mayor Levine Cava is talking about, is a really great idea. My view of a common goal for the region that could align everybody's incentives and really get you moving on sustainability as well as workforce and other things is to become a global solutions hub. Be the place that doesn't have to develop the solutions but brings them there, tests them, and sends them out to the world. And you know, one is concerned about tourism. I can imagine the green tourist attractions. Like, people should know more about the beach walk in Miami Beach and why that is one of the greatest climate moves of recent times. That's going to help hold the sea back, that gets carbon, and it's good for people who can walk and bike and love it.
Totally.
Those things have to be made more of, but Miami could be the solutions hub.
100%.
So when you're a solutions hub, you care about immediate impact and benefits to people. And I can see a lot of alignment of incentives around that as an overarching theme and vision. Academia, the universities that are growing here, could also be steering people toward those solutions. There's a world-class school here, the Rosenstiel School, University of Miami. They should be steering their students toward the developing of things that could be commercialized and tested here. Ocean. I mean, there's just a wealth of opportunities when you have a lot of problems. Business definitely has to be at the table in a big way.
In a way, you sort of, at the outset of the case, sort of this three-part construct. One, of course, is policy and government. Two is around community and activists. And then three, around the entrepreneurs, businesses, and innovation.
Absolutely. They all have to be at the table. They all have to be thinking about how to create the environment for the testing of solutions with immediate impact that you can see, that are visible, that you can taste. I mean, I would love to see a lot of carbon capture solutions, but you actually can't. They're a little futuristic, and you can't quite see it. A second one, I've already mentioned how isolated the climate entrepreneurs are. There needs to be an ecosystem. That's already starting somewhat. There's starting to be meetups. There's starting to be collectives. But make that much more visible. Do more of it. Help them together have collective impact.
So build the ecosystem.
Build the ecosystem. And an ecosystem, though, that's pretty all-encompassing and that motivates the rising generation to contribute to it. And I think if you do that, there's a whole other resource Miami has, the seasonal accomplished people. So this is their second home, but why aren't they visible? I know that may come to relax, but I don't think people...
So double down on that, particularly right now coming out of, with COVID, with the huge migration we had here, we have a whole new city to get to know.
Right.
And so your recommendation is really doubling down on connecting with and elevating these people.
And creating, in this ecosystem, creating high-profile clubs. I mean, that's what people join. They join a club. In that ecosystem, there's a lot. I think people have to be really creative and think well outside, as I like to say in my book title, well outside the building. and reach all those other ties. So that's the second, that ecosystem.
So let's keep going as thinking about sort of recommendations for Miami,
Yeah.
things we want to leave people with.
So the third big one that seems obvious on the table, there are a lot of, because you're working on it too, there are a lot of people working on workforce development. And it's in various agendas, green jobs, and how green jobs are a tremendous opportunity along with digital jobs
Yep.
for the underserved to learn and to get really good jobs. But it's again a little disconnected. There's going to be a lot more federal money for apprenticeships. We have a need, a lot of people who could learn, they could learn digital skills. We could have nothing but software engineers, but in fact that's not what we need
Right.
for a sustainable community. We need plumbers and electricians. We need the skilled trades. And you know, I'm a big fan of Ecosystems, which was a company started by
Which is included in the case.
by Richard Lamington and his brother, which retrofit buildings, and we can do individual houses or apartment buildings. They're doing it all over the country now to save water and save energy. So here you have people who need to save water and energy because they can't afford it, and you have a company that does that. Who do they hire? Plumbers and electricians.
Sure.
But we have these developers hanging out there. I want the developers on board for this workforce development because they could be doing the apprenticeships and they would then have a workforce that's skilled for their buildings, and you could tie it to what they do in the neighborhoods, what they do in Overtown, what they do in Miami Gardens. As long as they're working there and they apply some of those people's skills to upgrading their community, then we have a wonderful virtuous circle.
And then this all goes to your point that you alluded to earlier, is around communication. That in terms of for any of this to be done effectively, it's really built on strong communication.
So let me skip to communication. I'll skip beyond solar, which seems to be, to anybody who looks at this city, it's such an obvious opportunity. It gets complicated.
Well, no, let's talk. Yeah, let's not leave solar out. You're right. It's because right now solar is a missed opportunity in Miami. Let's talk about solar.
Because it's not totally in the hands, of all, even the sectors that I talked about. It's in the hands of the public utilities and other people. So unless there is great alignment around the need and everybody willing to help, it will be a very slow pace of change.
Right.
Because there are those, it might be said, who lobby against getting away from fossil fuels. But in fact, that is the biggest problem the planet has. And so that requires education. It requires innovation of another kind too, because I know there's a company who has their solar farm by the airport.
Yeah, Costex, yes.
Yes, you have highlighted that. So it's a huge opportunity, not only in the sense that we need it for connecting with the grid through alternative energy, but we need it as a source of a place for creativity and innovation.
Well, going back to your point of Miami being a solutions hub.
Absolutely. We need to be finding ways to bring this, I say, bring climate down to earth. And so I'll tell you a creative thing that I really love. That is, you have a young woman, you've had her on your podcast, Louisa Santos,
Sure,
from the school board. And one of their ideas is digital dashboards in schools. So kids see energy use and energy savings. But think about that writ large. What if there are digital dashboards everywhere measuring progress? Like, we managed to save this much carbon today.
Yep.
We managed to keep the floodwaters from what the projection was because we have a better storm drainage system. You find ways to make that tangible measurement, not just a vague goal.
Right.
And that's a really important part. And then you paste it everywhere and show it to people. And when people land at the airport, I know that everyone's afraid about chasing the tourists away. Believe me, they'll come.
Are you finding among your business students that more and more this is being viewed, addressing climate change is being viewed less as a we're in deep trouble, and more as we have an opportunity, and for aspiring entrepreneurs and business leaders, they're leaning into this as an opportunity.
I think there's a tremendous opportunity. I think they see it.
Yeah.
And when there are sources of capital looking for solutions, that will help them see it. They definitely see it. This is a very popular topic. The other thing we must remember, for a little reality though, is that every new technology displaces something.
Sure.
So I would say to those wedded to the old, and I won't mention any of their names, that they better get on board with alternative energy faster, because otherwise it'll be too much of a clash, a problem. So the entrepreneurs, yes, they definitely want change. They want it faster. They want to be in this business. They see the opportunity. I think federal money will help, as long as the money isn't channeled only to big public works, and that those public works are opportunities for innovation. We could have business students who are really interested in transportation infrastructure. I mean, batteries are a big deal.
100%.
And, you know, electric cars are kind of, as you know, kind of trendy and nice. So I think that it is a tremendous opportunity, but it's not a one-by-one grabbing the opportunity. I think a green bank, that's something we're talking about in Massachusetts, that gives loan guarantees and other things to help entrepreneurs raise the funds. That's really helpful.
Something for here.
And something for here, and I know small business is a big thrust here. So what if you have a green bank, you communicate all of that, communicate the opportunity, you get entrepreneurs from the neighborhoods who can get funding. They can get a loan guarantee, they can get training, they can get mentoring from developers, whatever it is, and then it becomes an opportunity. It's not an opportunity just because we say it is. Meanwhile, it can be every opportunity can be very messy and sloppy before we get there. What we need to do is be aware of all the stakeholders and how to bring them along. This is something where you can see the creation of the future unfold in front of you. And then the international, the global. This is a truly great global city. So I think a lot of things are happening here earlier, the problems. If they can be solved, there are tremendous opportunities.
We always like to end with 3 takeaways. And thinking about the case and thinking about addressing Miami's climate action future, what would be those 3 things you think should be top of mind?
So first of all, I have some of my favorite 3. One is dream big, because it takes as much time and energy to dream small as it does to dream big. The second is you can't do it alone. We hit upon this earlier.
Yep.
It takes more than a village. In fact, you can't solve the climate crisis here alone. The weather is not created here. It's created in the Caribbean. It's created a lot of places, but you can do a lot about the impact, the results. You can do a lot about being a model for change. That means that, in fact, we do hold global warming to a manageable level. I'll end with my third, which is one of my favorites. This is known mostly by me as Kanter's Law. Kanter's Law is that everything looks like a failure in the middle. Anything you start, particularly anything new and innovative, you hit roadblocks, you hit obstacles. It's not easy. If it were easy, everybody would have done it already. And so you have to persist and persevere. And that's back to the dream. If you don't have a big enough dream, and it's back to the collaborators, if you don't have allies who support you, you'll never persist. You have to think about the connections, the collaboration, the culture, and then you can begin to think about the actions and the policy and the science.
Rosabeth, this has been terrific. Thank you. Rosabeth Moss Kanter, thank you very much.
Thank you, Matt Habnan.
Opportunity Miami is powered by the Miami-Dade Beacon Council. Please like, review, and share our podcasts. It really helps. You can reach us with your story ideas and feedback at next@opportunity.miami. Thank you so much for joining us.